The box still sat open on the floor, its flaps folded neatly like wings. I hadn't even unpacked the linens when the phone rang. Wiping my hands on my jeans, I answered without checking the name. I didn't need to. Only one person called like that. "Hey, Kinley, just a heads up. We'll be there in about 2 hours. There are 20 of us from my side." I told them you had the space. "If you could get the rooms ready, that'd be great. Oh, and food, obviously, that was it." No pause. No, is this a good time? No congratulations on the new place. She made it sound like a delivery notification. I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words settle like dust. Then I said, "All right." Because I've learned that's the best answer when someone isn't really asking. When the call ended, I stood still, listening to the quiet creak of the new walls. I had moved in just 3 days ago. My name was still on the paperwork sitting in the folder on the counter. My name, no one else's. And yet somehow Kinley had already decided this would be a family lodge. Her family, to be exact. I didn't pace. I didn't cry. I walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out a yellow notepad, and opened it to a fresh page. I wrote the date at the top, drew a line down the middle. On one side, food, towels, trash bags, sleeping arrangements. On the other, legal, enforcement, documents, copies. I underlined copies twice. There were 22 chairs in the garage that came with the house. I had counted them last week with a kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. I'd imagined them filled, yes, but with friends, laughter, potlucks. Not this. They were coming whether I liked it or not. So I decided to like something else. Boundaries. I went to the guest room and changed the sheets, humming softly. Not from contentment, but from calculation. By the time the second pillow was fluffed, I had already made my first call. For decades, I'd made do. Rooms that weren't mine, kitchens where I tiptoed. After Roger passed, Camden had said, "Just until you find your footing, Mom." And I believed him. I always did. But 6 years later, I was still in their basement, folding laundry and packing school lunches I was never thanked for. They didn't charge rent. Kinley liked to point that out often. But they collected everything else. My time, my hands, my silence. That's why this cottage mattered. Not for its size or the lake view or the new tile in the bathroom, but because it was mine. Entirely mine. I'd saved for it the way other women my age saved for vacations or new cars. No loans, no co-signers, no shared title. But even before Kinley's call, I had known it wouldn't be simple. She always treated my things as a shared resource. If I baked something, she brought it to her book club. If I bought new towels, she'd say, "Oh good, we needed more." If I sat down, she'd ask, "Could you grab me the remote?" The house was new, but the dynamic wasn't, so when she told me 20 people were coming, I didn't panic. I prepared. I stripped the spare beds, shook out the blankets. Her youngest sister, Randa, had sensitive skin. She'd complain if the sheets were rough. I wiped down the bathroom sink with vinegar, knowing someone would still leave toothpaste in it. I laid out folded towels, already knowing half would vanish. I didn't do it out of fear. I did it the way you set a stage before the final act. Carefully, precisely, calmly, because the second page of my yellow notepad didn't list towels or snacks. It listed line items, guest policy, local ordinance codes, occupancy limits. I'd already spoken to a notary. I had the template ready. All it would take was one more step. And that step arrived with the sound of gravel cracking beneath unfamiliar tires. The first van pulled up just before noon. The second arrived 10 minutes later, followed by a sedan and a few people carrying folding chairs, and an energy none of them had earned. I counted as they spilled out onto the gravel. 22. Kinley had miscounted, or she simply hadn't cared. The greetings were loud, messy. A few nodded in my direction. No hugs. No congratulations on the new home. One cousin waved vaguely while dragging a suitcase. Someone else opened the fridge without asking. They didn't bring casseroles or flowers. They brought Bluetooth speakers, travel mugs, tangled phone chargers, and questions that weren't really questions. What's the Wi-Fi password? You only have one bathroom downstairs? Don't tell me you don't have oat milk. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. They moved like they'd been here before, like this wasn't a visit, but a takeover. The eldest aunt took the primary bedroom without asking. Kinley's cousin dropped her bag on the twin bed I'd set up for Camden's visit next month. When I came back from hanging coats, 2 teenagers were already arguing about which bed had the better view. I went to the small den, the one with the pull-out couch and the flickering lamp. I quietly gathered my things from the larger guest room. No one offered to help. No one asked if I was okay giving up my space. Kinley caught me carrying my folded clothes. She smiled that practice smile, the kind people wear when they've already decided for you. "It's just 2 weeks," she said, resting her hand on my shoulder. "Be flexible." I nodded. Flexibility, I've learned, is only admired when it benefits the person asking for it. I took the smallest room in the house without a word. Then I shut the door. Not hard, but with purpose. By nightfall, I'd finished revising the contract that no one knew was waiting. I placed the receipt gently on the dining table, right between a half-empty bottle of hot sauce and someone's damp flip-flops. "Just for transparency," I said, folding my hands. Kinley glanced at it, barely pausing between bites. "We'll send it later," she said with a laugh, nudging her cousin, who was already scrolling his phone. No one asked what I'd bought. No one offered to split the cost. I watched them pass plates like it was their potluck. Someone spilled grape soda on the porch cushions. No one cleaned it. They just flipped the cushion and walked away. That same evening, Kinley's brother tried to fix the dripping bathroom faucet after I mentioned it. 10 minutes later, I heard metal snap, followed by a muttered complaint about cheap fixtures. By the third night, the house smelled like takeout and spilled drinks. I heard music from 2 different rooms at midnight. My kitchen knives had been moved. The toilet paper holder was broken. I stopped asking. I just took notes. I wiped counters, swept trail mix from the hallway carpet, replaced a cracked plate with one from the hidden backup set. They brought noise and appetite, but mostly they brought entitlement. By day 5, I knew I wasn't waiting for a transfer. I wasn't waiting for respect either, so I stepped out onto the porch that still smelled faintly of artificial grape and opened the folder I'd tucked under the garden gloves. My fingers didn't hesitate. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Mrs. Marish?" the voice asked. "You ready?" "Yes," I replied. "I'm done hosting." She asked if I had the papers printed. "Yes," I said. They were stacked on the dining room buffet, next to the folded receipt no one had touched. By sunrise, I was already up. The house was quiet in that heavy way that comes after too many people, too many shoes, too many leftover voices. I taped 2 notices to the front door. Private property. Short-term lodging agreement required for all guests. Then I cleared the table. Empty cups, half-finished cereal, and set out 22 neatly printed copies. Each document listed 3 items. $140 per person per night. All damages billed separately. Full deposit required in advance. I placed a pen beside each stack. When Kinley came downstairs, she was wearing a hoodie that didn't belong to her. She glanced at the notices, then at the table. "What is this?" she asked. "A lodging agreement," I said. Her laugh was short. "Okay, funny." She picked up a page, skimmed it, then looked back at me. "You're serious?" I didn't respond. I just unlocked the front door and stepped aside. Right on time. Deputy Clem pulled up. We'd spoken twice that week. Once about the noise complaints, once about occupancy limits. He stepped in, nodded, and looked around. "Morning," he said. "This the group?" Kinley's face went pale. "You called the police on your own family?" I corrected her gently. "No, I called the county office. This is enforcement." Camden appeared in the hallway, rubbing his eyes. He didn't speak. But I saw the realization hit him. The contracts, the receipts, the timeline. Deputy Clem cleared his throat. "Everyone here will need to sign the agreement or vacate by this evening." Kinley dropped the paper. "You're unbelievable." "You're welcome to stay," I said calmly. "But not for free. Not anymore." Her voice cracked. "You're not really doing this, are you?" "I am," I replied, handing Deputy Clem the folder. "Everything's here. Recorded call, time-stamped messages, occupancy rules, neighborhood policy." Camden tried to intervene. "Mom, come on." "This is unnecessary." "They're just staying a little while." The deputy flipped through the pages, nodding. "Actually, it's lawful." She gave notice. "These aren't guests. They're occupants without permission." Someone muttered, "She's lost it." An older aunt shouted, "You think you can charge us like some kind of vacation rental?" "We're family." I turned to her. "No, you're Kinley's family. You've never sent me a birthday card, never invited me anywhere. And I've spent 5 days cleaning up after you." Camden's face flushed. I watched him chew his cheek, realizing he couldn't fix this. I handed Deputy Clem another set of papers. Text logs, emails, receipts, all organized and labeled. Kinley stared at me. "You actually recorded the call?" "Yes," I said plainly. "I did. Silence settled. No one laughed. No one asked for the Wi-Fi password. I unlocked the side drawer and pulled out the deposit forms. Deputy Clem looked at me. Shall I start collecting signatures? I didn't smile, but I nodded. When I turned to grab a new pen, I heard the sound of someone packing upstairs. By sunset, the driveway filled with the shuffle of dragging wheels, slamming trunks, and low, bitter voices. The vans were loaded again, pillows stuffed into back windows, folding chairs wedged between duffel bags. Someone knocked over my flower pots on the way out. No apology, just the quick rhythm of feet hurrying away. One of the younger cousins leaned out the window as they pulled off and shouted, "You'll end up all by yourself." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I stood at the gate, holding the clipboard. Heavier than it looked. Not from paper, but from the weight of finally choosing myself. Camden walked to the car, with Kinley trailing behind. Her jaw was tight, arms crossed. She didn't look at me until she reached the sidewalk. "You made this hostile," she said, her words landing like a final shot. I met her eyes and replied calmly, "No, I just made it clear." Camden didn't look at me. He got in the car, closed the door, and stared straight ahead. I stood there until both vans and the sedan disappeared around the curve of the street. The wind lifted the corner of the notice still taped to the porch. I turned back, toward the house, opened the door, and stepped inside. No voices, no footsteps overhead, no music leaking through the walls. Just silence. I set the clipboard down on the counter and wiped the ring of dust where someone had left a cup of soda. I took the trash out, then lit a small candle I'd been saving for after the chaos. Its flicker cast soft shadows across the tile. For the first time in over a week, I sat at the dining table, not to clean, not to tally receipts, not to write reminders, but just to sit. And the quiet wasn't empty. It was full of everything they didn't take with them. Dignity, peace, and space that was finally mine again. I took a long breath and reached for the envelope Camden had left on the side table. It was unsealed. His handwriting, tight, careful, just like in school. "I hope one day you see how cold this was." That was all. No signature. Just that line, as if it had the final word. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble or reread it, searching for softness between the syllables. I folded it once, then again, and slipped it into the fireplace. The flame caught quickly. The paper curled like it wanted forgiveness. I didn't grant it that. I walked through the house slowly. Kinley had left towels crumpled on the floor. Someone's makeup bag sat tipped in the guest bathroom. Powder dust across the sink, beds unmade. Sheets half off, a slice of pizza crust abandoned on the windowsill like an afterthought. I didn't pick up a thing. Instead, I made one more call. By noon the next day, a cleaning service arrived. 2 kind, efficient women. I made them tea and let them work. I didn't scrub away the mess. I documented it. Took photos, marked damages, logged the hours. Then I sent Kinley an invoice. Attached was a clear copy of the short-term rental agreement, her name signed at the bottom in bold, impatient strokes I still recognized. The email subject read, "Final statement for your stay. No emotions. No guilt, just facts and figures. Exactly. What she'd ignored when she assumed the rules didn't apply to her. This wasn't punishment, it was math. It was boundaries. Tallied and delivered. I didn't wait for a reply. I closed my laptop, poured a cup of strong coffee, and sat by the window overlooking the gravel path. The sky was pale, that soft kind of blue that feels like a new page. When I opened the drawer to file the receipt, I noticed the untouched stack of welcome cards I'd bought before they arrived, still wrapped. Still waiting, still mine. A week passed just like that. No messages, no sudden knocks, no last-minute arrivals with coolers and duffel bags. I spent the first morning replanting the front garden. The soil was dry where the folding chairs had sunk in. I pulled weeds, trimmed the lavender, and reset the stepping stones they'd kicked aside. It felt good. Quiet, steady work. No one rushing me, no one asking where the extension cord was, or if I had another air mattress. I made tea just before noon. Not for guests, not for anyone but me. I used the good cup. The one with the small crack I'd always hidden, afraid someone else would break it. A neighbor I hadn't met waved from the sidewalk. Another stopped by with muffins, said she'd noticed I'd finally moved in. She didn't ask questions, just smiled, handed me the tin, and said, "Welcome inside." The silence wasn't lonely. It was restorative, the kind that fills your chest slowly and lets your shoulders drop an inch lower. No loud voices echoing through the hall, no music pounding through the ceiling. No one asking if I had gluten-free bread or a spare charger. The laundry basket was empty. The sink was clean. I watered the plants, straightened the chairs, and opened every window just because I could. No one asked me to change the thermostat. No one told me how to plan meals. No one called me rigid for expecting. A little respect in my own home. The house didn't feel big. It felt right. There were no calls from Camden, no texts from Kinley, but I didn't feel erased. I felt unburdened. Sometimes, choosing peace doesn't come with applause. It comes with stillness. I sat at the edge of the garden that afternoon, watching a squirrel try to outrun its own shadow. And when I looked up at the wind chimes I'd finally hung, I noticed something I hadn't seen in years. They only moved when the wind allowed. Kinley called again 2 nights ago. Then twice more yesterday. No voicemail, just missed calls and a string of texts, some polite, some sharp, one that said, "We need to talk." Camden followed with a message of his own. "Can we clear the air? It's been long enough." I didn't answer, not out of anger, not from spite, but because I was finished. This house was never meant to be a revolving door or a doormat. It wasn't built to hold everyone else's expectations. It was mine. Still is. And now it finally feels like it. The locks have been changed. The porch sign that once said "Welcome" now reads, "By appointment only." Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. I keep the guest room tidy, but I no longer pretend it's available. I cook for one. I grocery shop without anyone's preferences in mind. My days are quiet. My nights are mine. 2 days after the last car pulled away, I spoke with my lawyer. We updated the deed. Not the ownership, but a clause. Inheritance is contingent upon demonstrated respect. It's not vengeance. It's structure, a map for those who once mistook my silence for weakness. Kinley will likely call again. Camden. 2, they won't understand. Not right away. Because when people are used to taking, they mistake boundaries for betrayal. But this isn't a feud I'm not fighting, I'm preserving. The house still fills with light each morning. The plants are blooming. Again. And the wind chimes sing when they choose. 2, not when someone forces them. Respect doesn't need permission to exist. It just stops. Waiting for approval when I closed the folder on the final set of notarized pages. I felt no weight, only certainty. I placed it in the drawer beside the key box, locked it, and turned toward the open door. The wind carried in the scent of lavender and lake air, and for the first time, it smelled entirely like home. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the lace curtains, turning the kitchen gold. The kettle hissed softly as I leaned against the counter, watching the steam rise. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty anymore. I opened my notebook, the same yellow one from that first day, now filled with notes, lists, receipts, and reminders. On the last page, I wrote 2 words, "Next chapter." After breakfast, I walked down to the small post office in town. The clerk, a cheerful woman with silver hair, greeted me like an old friend. "You're the new lady at the lake house, right?" "Heard you finally moved in," I smiled. "Yes, finally." She handed me a stack of mail, mostly circulars, and one letter addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize inside was an invitation. A local community meeting about a volunteer gardening project at the Lakeside Park. For a moment, I hesitated. Old habits whisper quietly, stay small, stay polite, stay home. But I had already done that for decades. So I folded the letter, placed it on the counter, and said to myself, I'll go. Later that afternoon, I packed a small bag, slipped on my garden gloves, and drove toward the lake road. The park was full of strangers, laughing, chatting, planting rows of tulips in the early spring sun. One woman, Carol Barnes, waved me over. We could use an extra pair of hands. Her smile was the kind that didn't expect anything in return. We worked side by side for hours, digging, planting, and telling small stories. Nothing deep, but kind. By sunset, the beds were covered in neat rows of soil, and the air smelled like fresh earth and possibility. Before leaving, Carol touched my arm gently. You should join us next week, she said. We're starting a reading group at the library, and we always bring pie. I laughed, a soft, real laugh I hadn't heard from myself in a long time. I might just do that. I told her, driving home. The road curved along the water, the lake catching the last streaks of amber light. When I reached my driveway, I stopped for a moment before stepping out. The porch sign still read, "By appointment only," but for the first time, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like balance. Inside, I made tea again, this time with a sprig of lavender from my own garden. I sat at the same dining table where the noise used to gather and opened a blank page in the notebook. At the top, I wrote, "This is how peace begins, but not with silence, but with choice." Then I closed the book, blew out the candle, and let the night settle softly around me. It had been 3 quiet weeks. The lavender in the front garden had begun to bloom again, soft purple against the pale gravel path. Every morning, I brewed my coffee, opened the kitchen window, and listened to the sound of the lake, steady, patient, certain the stillness no longer felt like waiting. It felt earned. One morning, as I was watering the ferns by the porch, I heard the faint hum of an engine turning into the drive. A white delivery van stopped near the gate. The driver stepped out, holding a small box. "Package for Beatrice Sterling," he said. I signed for it. Curious. I hadn't ordered anything. The box was light, wrapped neatly in brown paper, with no return address. Inside, beneath a layer of tissue, was a single hardcover book, The Language of Boundaries, and a note tucked between the pages. "I saw this and thought of you. Thank you for showing me that standing firm doesn't mean closing doors." The handwriting was familiar. Neat, deliberate, slightly uncertain. Camden. I sat down on the porch step, sunlight spilling across the page, and read the first line of the book. Peace doesn't come from being unchallenged. It comes from knowing what you will and will not allow. For the first time in months, I let myself smile, not with victory, but with understanding. Later that afternoon, I called Carol. "Still meeting at the library tonight?" I asked. She laughed. "Of course. Bring your book if you like. We've got coffee and too many muffins again." When I arrived, the library smelled of paper and cinnamon. The group sat in a circle near the big windows. Carol waved me over. "Everyone, this is Bea. She just moved here." I smiled shyly, settling into the empty chair beside her. Someone passed me a slice of blueberry pie. Someone else asked where I was from. No one asked who I had once lived with, or who I had once waited on. The conversation turned to gardens, travel plans, favorite songs, simple things that filled the air like warmth. And as the evening sun faded through the glass, I realized something I hadn't expected. I was finally part of something that didn't need me to disappear to belong. When I returned home that night, the wind chimes swayed gently. The candle on the table had melted into a soft pool of wax, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't mind the sound of an open, empty house. It wasn't empty, it was peaceful, and peace, I had learned, is the truest form of presence. It was a late summer afternoon when I first saw her car again. A familiar dark blue sedan slowed at the gate, hesitated, and then rolled into the driveway. I was sitting on the porch, pruning lavender stems into a woven basket. For a moment, I thought she might drive away, but the engine turned off. The door opened and Kinley stepped out. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not in size, but in certainty. No sunglasses this time. No loud voice calling from the car. Just quiet steps on the gravel. I didn't stand right away. I placed the shears down carefully beside me. She paused at the edge of the porch steps, her hands clasped in front of her like she was trying to hold something fragile together. "Mom," she said softly, and for the first time in years, the word didn't sound like an obligation. I came to return something. From her bag, she pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the copy of the lodging agreement, the one she had once dropped on the table like it burned her fingers. She placed it on the porch railing. "I read it again," she said quietly. This time, I actually read it. The air between us felt heavy, but not angry. "Just full. I didn't come to argue," she added. I came to understand. I nodded toward the empty chair beside me. "Then sit." She hesitated, then did. The wooden chair creaked, the same sound it made that first week they'd arrived. But now it was only the two of us, and the silence didn't demand an answer. We sat that way for a while, the lavender scent drifting in the warm breeze. Finally, she said, "You were right. We took too much. I didn't see it. I thought family meant everything was shared." "Family does mean sharing," I said. "But not taking." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "I don't know how to fix it," she whispered. "You already started," I replied. "You came back without noise." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The wind chimes moved gently above us, soft, unforced, natural. When she stood to leave, she didn't look rushed. "I'll call next time," she said. "If that's okay." "That's the point," I answered. "You don't need permission." "Just respect," she smiled faintly. A small, tired smile, but real. Then she walked back to her car. Before the engine started, she rolled the window down and said, "By the way, the kids still talk about your blueberry muffins." I laughed quietly. "Tell them I'll bake more when they visit with an invitation." As the car disappeared down the road, I looked at the folded paper she'd left behind. The edges were worn, the ink slightly faded, but she'd underlined one line near the bottom. "All guests agree to honor the property, its owner, and the peace it holds." I pressed the paper flat, then slid it into my notebook, the one now marked "Next Chapter." Inside, I wrote a single sentence beneath it. "Some doors don't close. They just learn to open the right way." The sky turned amber over the lake, and for the first time in years, I felt not just peace, but possibility. Autumn arrived quietly, the kind that doesn't announce itself, just settles in through cooler mornings and gold on the trees. The lake grew still again, reflecting the changing sky like glass. One evening, after dinner, I checked the mail before heading inside. Among the bills and flyers, there was a cream-colored envelope embossed with gold letters, "Sterling Digital Literacy Foundation." For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, a fundraising letter or a general announcement. But when I opened it, my name was typed neatly at the top. "Dear Mrs. Sterling, your name was recently recommended to our board for a community initiative, a mentorship program for women over 60, focused on rebuilding confidence and digital independence. We would be honored if you'd consider joining as an advisor. Sincerely, Vanessa Lee, Program Director, Everglow Beauty Partnership." Read it twice. It wasn't the kind of invitation I'd ever expected. Not after the years I'd spent fading into the corners of other people's lives. I thought about all the times I'd been told I wasn't tech savvy, that these things were for the younger generation. And now someone wanted me to teach others how to start. Again, I set the letter on the table beside my mug, the candlelight flickering across the signature. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet part of me, the part that had once gone silent, started to stir. The next morning, I called the number printed at the bottom. "Sterling Foundation Office," came a warm voice. "This is Beatrice Sterling," I said. "I received your letter." A pause, then a smile through the phone. "Oh, Mrs. Sterling, we were hoping you'd call. We've heard quite a bit about your story." "My story?" I asked softly. "Yes, about how you reclaimed your home, your peace, and your sense of self." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. No one had ever called that a story before. By the end of the conversation, I had agreed to meet with them the following week in Portland. When I hung up, I stood by the window, watching the light shift across the lake. The reflection shimmered, like something waiting just beneath the surface. Not the past, but the next beginning. I picked up my yellow notebook from the counter and opened it to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote in careful letters, "The Sterling Digital Literacy Project, First Meeting." And below that, "Never too old to begin again." The train to Portland hummed softly along the tracks, its rhythm steady and calm. Outside the window, the fields rolled by in shades of amber and evergreen. I had packed lightly. One navy dress, my notebook, and the quiet confidence I'd earned the hard way. The foundation office sat in a renovated brick building downtown, its glass doors bright with morning light. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and new paper, a scent I'd always loved. A young receptionist greeted me. "Mrs. Sterling?" "Ms. Lee will see you now." Vanessa Lee stood by the window of a sunlit conference room, tall, poised, with a warmth that didn't need words. She extended her hand with a smile. "I've read your notes," she said, "and your letter to the county office, the one about property rights and personal boundaries. It made its way to us. You write with such clarity." I laughed softly. "I didn't write it to inspire anyone. I just wanted peace," Vanessa nodded. "That's exactly why it's powerful. You didn't seek a platform. You built one by standing still." Around the table sat 4 other women, each different, but with the same quiet strength in their eyes. Vanessa gestured toward them. This is our advisory circle. We meet once a week to help design digital literacy programs for older women. Things like online safety, financial awareness, communication tools. A woman in a gray blazer leaned forward. We want to make it practical, not just pretty words. Real empowerment, real stories. I listened, at first silent. The old reflex, to observe, not to speak, still lingered. But when they asked what had helped me rebuild my life, the words came naturally. Documentation, I said. Writing things down, step by step. When people try to erase your voice, having it in writing reminds you that you existed and that you mattered. The room fell quiet. Then Vanessa smiled. I think, she said, that's the message our program needs. By the end of the meeting, they'd offered me a formal role, community advisor, Sterling Digital Literacy Foundation. When I stepped outside, the air felt cool and clean. I crossed the street to a cafe, ordered tea, and sat by the window overlooking the city. On the napkin beside my cup, I wrote 3 words, teach what healed. That evening, back at the lake house, I placed the foundation's folder beside my candle and notebook. The house was quiet, but this time, the silence didn't mean solitude. It meant purpose. Outside, the wind moved through the lavender, and the chimes sang softly, not a song of endings anymore, but of beginnings. The library in Portland smelled of polished wood and rain-soaked coats, the kind of scent that carried stories. Rows of computers lined the back wall, their screens glowing faintly beneath soft overhead lights. I arrived early. The staff had already set out a tray of tea, a plate of muffins, and a small sign on the door that read, Sterling Foundation Workshop, Digital Confidence for Every Age. I stood for a moment just inside the doorway, breathing in the quiet hum of the place. This was where it began. Not the struggle, but the sharing. The first few women arrived hesitantly. Like students on their first day back after a long time away, some carried notebooks. Others clutched old phones or tablets with screens cracked like dried leaves. Come in, I said, smiling. There's no test, no rush, and no wrong questions. They laughed softly, the nervous kind of laughter that hides both curiosity and fear. As they settled, I noticed one woman standing apart from the group near the back shelves. She wore a beige cardigan, her gray hair pulled back neatly, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her glasses. Her name tag read Elaine. When she finally sat down, she whispered, I'm not sure I belong here. I barely know how to turn this thing on. She lifted her tablet as if it were something fragile. I smiled gently. Then you're exactly where you should be. Do you know how I started? She shook her head. By Googling how to Google, I said. The room broke into warm laughter. Even Elaine smiled. We began with the basics. Passwords, email, video calls. But halfway through, the session became something more. They started sharing. Not questions about buttons or settings, but stories. One woman admitted she hadn't seen her granddaughter on video chat in over a year because she was too embarrassed to ask for help. Another said her daughter managed all her finances online, and she felt invisible. Like life's moving too fast, and I'm just watching it pass. I listened. I understood. At the end of the class, I wrote 3 words on the whiteboard. Knowledge is freedom. Then I added, and freedom doesn't expire. When the session ended, Elaine approached me. Her eyes shimmered the way mine once had. Tired, hopeful, unsure. Thank you, she said quietly. I didn't realize how much of my life I'd stopped touching. You're touching it again, I told her. That's what matters. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sidewalks glistened, and the city lights reflected in the puddles like small constellations. As I walked to my car, I saw Vanessa Lee standing under an umbrella, waving. How did it go? She asked. I smiled. Better than I expected. They reminded me what courage looks like, starting from 0. She nodded. Then you've already done what you came for. Driving back to the lake that night, the road shimmered with wet light. The world felt wide again. Not because it had changed, but because I finally had. When I reached home, I wrote in my yellow notebook, You're never too old to start again. But sometimes, you have to start by helping someone else begin. Then I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and let the sound of the lake fill the dark. Winter came softly to Portland. Gray mornings, fog rising over the lake, and quiet evenings filled with the smell of pine and candle wax. The foundation's work had grown faster than any of us expected. Each week, more women signed up for classes. Retired teachers, widows, nurses, grandmothers, all learning how to navigate a world that had moved online without waiting for them. Then, one afternoon, an email arrived from Vanessa Lee. The subject line read, "Invitation, Voices of Renewal, City Hall Event." I opened it, expecting a newsletter or another planning notice. But the first line made my hands still. "We'd like you to be one of our keynote speakers. Your story. The cottage, the family, the quiet reclaiming. It's become a touchstone for our community work. We want others to hear it from you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Me, standing in front of a crowd? I had spent years speaking softly, making myself smaller to keep peace. And now they wanted me to fill a room with my voice. That evening, I brewed chamomile tea and sat by the window, watching snow settle across the lavender garden. The thought of it made my chest tighten. Fear. Yes, but something else too. Pride. For once, the story wasn't about surviving someone else's choices. It was about making my own. The following week, I took the early train to City Hall. The old building gleamed under soft December light, decorated with white poinsettias and evergreen garlands. The event banner read, "Voices of Renewal, Women Who Began Again." Behind the stage curtain, I could hear the gentle murmur of an audience. More than 100 people. Vanessa touched my arm. "Calm and reassuring. You don't have to tell everything," she whispered. "Just what healed you." When they called my name, I stepped into the light. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. And then I began. "I never meant to start over," I said, my voice steady but low. "But sometimes, peace begins when you stop asking permission to have it." I told them about the lake house, about boundaries, about finding stillness after noise. Not with bitterness, with truth. I saw heads nodding. A few tears, a few quiet smiles. Then I said, "Rebuilding doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it's a quiet breakfast alone in a clean kitchen. Sometimes it's saying no for the first time and meaning it. And sometimes it's realizing that your silence was never weakness. It was strength waiting to speak." When I finished, the applause didn't come right away. It built slowly, like a wave, soft but certain. And in that sound, I felt something loosen. The last thread of the old fear unraveling. Afterward, people came up to me, strangers, each with their own version of starting again. One woman pressed my hand and said, "You made me believe my story isn't over yet." On the ride home, the city lights shimmered against the window glass. I thought of Camden and Kinley. Not with resentment, but with distance that no longer hurt. Healing, I realized, isn't about erasing the past. It's about making peace with its echo. When I returned to the cottage, I lit a candle and opened my yellow notebook. On a new page, I wrote, "My voice found its way home." And beneath it, "Next spring, new classes, new women, same mission." Outside, the snow fell quietly. The lake reflected the moonlight like a mirror, and the wind chimes, faint but steady, carried the sound of completion. It was early spring when the letter arrived, handwritten in blue ink, with looping, uncertain cursive that looked like it belonged to someone still learning who they were. The return address made my heart pause for just a second. Phoenix, Arizona, and the name in the corner, Lila Sterling. I carried the envelope to the porch, the morning light still soft across the lake, and sat down before opening it. The paper inside was folded twice. Carefully, it smelled faintly of lilac perfume, the kind young girls borrow from their mothers. "Hi, Grandma. Mom doesn't know I'm writing this yet. I saw your video, the one from the Voices of Renewal event. Someone posted it on a page about women's stories. I watched it twice, maybe 3 times. You said peace doesn't ask for permission. That stuck with me. I want to understand you, and I want to meet you, not the version everyone talks about, but the real you, if that's okay." Lila, the words blurred for a moment. Not from tears, but from the rush of everything I thought I'd lost coming back in a softer shape. I folded the letter gently and pressed it to my chest. It had been years since I'd heard her name, said aloud in this house. Back then, Kinley had always referred to her as the baby, the little one, never Lila. Maybe this was how change began, quietly, through the next generation. That evening, I wrote back, "Dear Lila, thank you for your letter. I'm proud of you for reaching out. That takes courage. Yes, I'd love to see you. The lake house still stands where it always has, though it feels lighter now. Come when you can. There will be tea, and we'll start from the truth, not the past. Grandma B.I. sealed the envelope and set it beside the candle on the counter, ready to mail it in the morning. A week later, the sound of tires on gravel pulled me from the garden. I wiped my hands on my apron and turned toward the driveway. A silver hatchback rolled to a stop. A girl stepped out. 17, maybe 18. Her dark hair pulled into a loose braid, eyes the same soft green as the lake after rain. "Grandma?" she said, hesitant but sure. I nodded. "Lila." We met halfway. No dramatic music, no tears, just a long, quiet hug that said more than words ever could. When she pulled back, she smiled nervously. "I brought something." From her bag, she took out a small USB drive. "It's my portfolio. Photos I took for my school project. Mom doesn't really get why I love this stuff, but maybe you will." I gestured toward the house. "Come in. Let's see what you've made." Inside, the afternoon light streamed through the windows, dust dancing like memory. We plugged in the drive, and the screen filled with her images. Portraits of people at bus stops, quiet street corners, reflections in shop windows. They weren't perfect, but they were honest. "They're beautiful," I said. She shrugged. "They're just real." "Exactly," I smiled. "That's what makes them beautiful." We talked for hours. About school, photography, music, about the way the world feels too loud sometimes. And at some point, I realized she wasn't just my granddaughter, she was the first branch of peace growing from a tree I thought was long cut down. When she left that evening, the sun was low over the lake. She turned at the car door and said, "Mom doesn't know I came, but I think someday she will." "I know," I said softly, "and when she does, the door will still be open." After she drove away, I stood by the water, the letter still folded in my pocket, and whispered to the wind chimes, "Some stories don't end. They just find a gentler way to continue." It happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind of soft, cool evening when the wind shifts just enough to make the lake shimmer. I was tending to the herb garden when my phone buzzed on the porch railing. A message from Kinley. For a moment, I thought it might be another half-formed apology or another attempt to rewrite the past. But when I opened it, it was just 3 words. "We need to talk." I knew what it meant. Lila had told her. Not in anger, not in rebellion, simply because she was honest. Something the world doesn't always reward, but always needs. I typed back, "Come by tomorrow. Afternoon is best. No explanations, no theatrics, just space." The one thing none of us had truly given each other all those years. The next day, her dark blue sedan pulled into my driveway. Slower this time, like she was approaching something delicate. I opened the front door before she knocked. She stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, like she was bracing for winter. Her eyes were tired, not with anger, but with a kind of emotional jet lag from carrying too much for too long. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Of course. Inside, the cottage was warm, the scent of chamomile drifting softly. Through the air, she looked around as if she were seeing it for the first time. I really seeing it. Not as a place to spread sleeping bags, not as a free vacation home, but as my home. She sat at the dining table, shoulders tense. "I didn't know she went to see you," she began. She didn't sound upset. She sounded exposed. I poured us both tea and slid a cup toward her. "She was respectful," I said. "And thoughtful?" she asked. Kinley stared into the steam. "Did she tell you I'm angry?" I shook my head. "No. She told me she's searching for her own truth." Kinley let out a breath, long and shaky. "She shouldn't have gone behind my back." "Why not?" I asked gently. "She's your daughter, yes, but she's also herself." Her eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time in years, I saw the girl she used to be, buried under years of trying too hard and receiving too little in return from life. "She said you were kind to her," Kinley whispered. "That scares me. Why?" I asked softly. "Because if she sees you as the safe one, what does that make me?" There it was, the truth she'd been circling for years. Not anger, not entitlement. Fear, a fear that motherhood demanded perfection, even when perfection was a myth that broke anyone who tried to carry it. I reached across the table, not to touch her, but to make sure she saw the steadiness in my hands. Being a parent doesn't mean being everything, I said. It means being willing to grow. Even now, her voice trembled. I didn't grow. I just pushed. And I pushed you the hardest. I nodded. You did. But pushing didn't make you unworthy. It made you overwhelmed. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Not dramatic, not performative, just tired. Mom, I didn't know how to stop taking from you. I thought if I stopped, everything would fall apart. Nothing fell apart, I said. It just changed shape. She looked at me like she was seeing that truth for the first time. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not the defensive, sorry if you felt that way. Not the angry, fine, sorry, but the small, quiet apology of someone who finally realized they'd been standing on the wrong side of the door. You don't owe me perfection, I said. You owe me honesty and respect. That's all. She wiped her face, laughing through the tears. And Lila, do I owe her that too? You owe her the chance to know you, I said. The real you. Kinley looked around the cottage again. The clean counters, the lavender on the windowsill, the photographs of the lake at sunrise. It's peaceful here, she murmured. No wonder she liked it. And you? I asked. Do you like it? She hesitated, then nodded. I think I do. We didn't hug. We didn't pretend everything was fixed. But when she stood to leave, she paused at the door. Can I come back? She asked quietly. Next time? With more respect? I smiled. Next time? With tea, she nodded, wiped her eyes again, and stepped outside. The door closed softly behind her. Not like an ending, but like a bookmark. As her car disappeared down the winding road, I whispered to the quiet room, some relationships don't break. They bend. And sometimes, they bend all the way back to the people we hoped they'd become. The wind chimes rang gently, as if agreeing. It was 3 days after Kinley's visit when the next shift came. Quieter, heavier, and somehow inevitable. A soft knock echoed through the cottage just after sunset. Not hurried, not demanding, just hesitant. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. On the porch, shoulders slightly hunched, stood Camden. My son, older than I remembered him looking, younger than he allowed himself to be. Mom. Just that one word. Stripped of defensiveness, stripped of pride, a word that suddenly felt brand new again. Come in, I said gently. He stepped over the threshold like it was holy ground. His eyes scanned the room. The tidy shelves, the lit candle, the tea kettle humming softly. A home, not a crash pad, not a storage unit for other people's needs. Mine. We sat at the dining table, the same place where so much had unraveled before. This time, the air felt still, respectful, waiting. He didn't start with excuses. He didn't start with a speech. He just looked at his hands and said quietly, I saw Lila's pictures. Ah, there it was, the thread he held. Unsure how to pull it without breaking everything. She's talented, I said. She is, he whispered. And she said she felt at ease here. With you, he swallowed hard. Mom, I don't know how to feel about that. I nodded. I know. He looked up finally, eyes shining but steady. You would think I'd be grateful, proud even. But instead, he exhaled. I felt replaced. The honesty cut deeper than any argument ever had. You're not replaced, I said softly. You're rearranged. He blinked at me. Rearranged? Yes, life moves us around, sometimes without asking. You became a father, a husband, a provider. Somewhere in that shuffle, you forgot you were also a son? His breath shook. I did. I really did. A long pause settled between us, warm and fragile. Then, Mom, he said, voice trembling. Did you ever think I didn't love you? I reached across the table, placing my hand over his, age spotted but steady. No, I said. I thought you were tired of choosing me. His shoulders fell. His fingers tightened around mine. I wasn't tired, he murmured. I was scared. Scared to disappoint everyone at once, so I avoided choosing altogether. And in avoiding it, I said gently, you chose the easiest path. Not the right one. Tears slipped down his face. Not the dramatic tears of regret, but the quiet, exhausted tears of someone finally coming home in his own skin. I'm sorry, he said, for the years. You stayed in our basement. For the holidays you cooked. alone, for letting them treat. "You're home like it wasn't yours. I survived it," I whispered. I grew from it. He nodded through the tears. And I need to grow from it too. Outside, the wind chimes began to sway, slow, deliberate. As if listening. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't want to be the son who only comes around when things break." "Then don't be," I answered simply. He let out a breath. Shaky, relieved. "Can we start over?" Not from the beginning, but from the honest part. A single tear, warm and old, slipped down my cheek. "Yes," I said, "we can start from here." When he stood to leave, he hugged me, carefully at first, then completely. The kind of hug you give someone when you finally remember they are home. At the door, he looked back. "Next time, I'll bring dinner." "Next time," I smiled, "I'll let you." As his car disappeared into the dusk, I closed the door gently and leaned against the frame. Not from weariness, but from a sweet, grounding fullness. Some families shatter, some rebuild, and some, like mine, learn the quiet art of bending back toward the light. The cottage felt warm again, not just with peace now, but with possibility. Early summer arrived gently. Bright mornings, warm evenings, and a calmness that settled over the lake like a soft blanket. By then, life had found a steady rhythm. Classes at the library, meetings with the foundation, letters from women who had found their voices again. Peace was no longer something I protected. It was something I lived in. Then, one Saturday morning, as I was trimming lavender by the porch, I heard the unmistakable sound of tires rolling over gravel. Not rushed, not chaotic, not 20 people pouring out at once, just one car, then another, and then a third. I stood slowly, brushing soil off my hands, a silver hatchback, a blue sedan, and behind them, a white rental car. The doors opened, Lila stepped out first, her expression hopeful, a tote bag slung over her shoulder. Camden emerged next, calm, steady, carrying a casserole dish like it was a peace offering, and finally, slowly, almost cautiously, Kinley. She didn't cross her arms this time. She didn't scan the porch for weaknesses. She simply looked at me to Matthew openly. Honestly, "Hi, Mom," she said. I nodded, smiling gently. "Hello, all of you." Lila was the first to approach. "Grandma, we brought lunch. Real lunch. Not takeout," I laughed softly. "Fancy." Camden joined us, setting the dish carefully on the porch table. "I told them," he said, "that we'd do this right." And then Kinley stepped forward. Not too close, but close enough that I felt the intention behind it. "I know this doesn't erase anything," she said quietly, "and it's not meant to. We just wanted to come as a family. A real one. Not the kind that crowds you or drains you, or takes you for granted, just us. Trying again. There were no tears, no dramatic speeches, just truth. Simple and overdue." I gestured toward the porch. "Well then," I said, "if you're all trying again, come in. I made fresh lemonade." Inside, the house felt different, like it could hold us without strain now. Lila placed her camera bag by the window and began showing me her new photos. Camden set the table, humming under his breath, something he hadn't done since he was a boy, and Kinley moved slowly through the cottage, her fingers brushing lightly over the framed photos, the blooming plants, the carefully chosen books. Not in inspection, in acknowledgement. When she finally sat beside me at the table, she said, "I see it now, why you fought for this place. It feels like you." "It should," I answered. "That's the point." We ate together, quietly, gently, the way people do when they're not rushing or pretending. After lunch, we walked to the garden. Lila took pictures of the lavender, laughing as the breeze tangled her hair. Camden helped me reset a stepping stone, and Kinley stood beside the lake, watching the sunlight ripple across the water. When she turned back, she said something I will keep forever. "I want to come back, not to stay, not to take, just to visit, if that's okay with you." "It is," I said. "It always will be." "With respect." She nodded. I understand that now, I really do. As the afternoon faded into soft gold, the three of them walked back to their cars. Hugs were exchanged. Warm, genuine, patient hugs, the kind that aren't seeking forgiveness, but offering connection. Before leaving, Lila turned and called out, "Grandma, When can I come back for another lesson? I smiled. Whenever you want. And when their cars disappeared around the bend of the road, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt rooted, centered, whole. I walked to the porch, the wind chimes singing softly, and sat down with my yellow notebook. On its last page, I wrote, "Peace is not the ending of a story. It's the beginning of living it on your own terms." I closed the notebook. The lake shimmered, the lavender swayed, and for the first time in my long life, the future felt open, not because others had made room for me, but because I had made room for myself. The end and the beginning.